Today I wanted to talk about the different severities of ME. When I got diagnosed, when I was having regular contact with doctors, nobody told me about it. Nobody explained the wide variety of of severity. I feel like there's almost an endless sea of information that was left out when I was diagnosed and early in my illness. They basically told me I had it, full stop. And so I feel like I didn't really have the understanding of all of the things that other people seem to know lots about. Maybe they know it from their own research, which I didn't do any. I was a teenager who was really struggling and I could not care less. So the fact that I don't know about it but everyone else does may simply be a case of everyone else looked further into it and I didn't. Over time, I've absorbed the kind of basic understanding of very severe, moderate and mild. Without having looked at it, I would probably have put myself in the moderate category. I think sometimes I'm severe, sometimes I'm moderate, but that's kind of where I sit. I'm almost never at mild and I'm almost never at very severe, but I couldn't really tell you any more detail than that. So what I wanted to do today is go through the ME Association's rating scale. ME is split up into very severe, severe, severe to moderate, moderate, moderate to mild, and recovered. And along with that, they have the percentages going from 100% disability to 0% disability. Hopefully, once I've read the scale in the document, I'll be able to pinpoint where I am and where I have been in the past. What I'd really like to know, have you heard of this before? Have you heard of the severe, mild, moderate, that wasn't the right order, severe, moderate, mild scale? Have you heard of the percentages scale? And do you put any store by them? Do you think they're useful? I'd love to know, because it feels from my perspective that everybody knows about this except me, but maybe that's just a bias of the only people who talk about it are obviously the people who already know about it. So let's have a look. I think it's quite obvious that I'm not at 100%. Confined to bed all day and night, incapable of living independently. I am sitting up, I am talking to you, I have light coming in through the window, I put makeup on, I did my hair, all of these things I think wouldn't be possible at 100%. So I think clearly I'm not 100%, and I'm not sure I've ever been completely bedbound. I think I've probably been close. I think I've probably been mostly bedbound, but completely isn't something I've actually experienced. So at 90%, confined to bed for much or all of the time, can stand for a short period but not able to walk, may have episodes of temporary paralysis. I did used to have temporary paralysis, but I guess it depends what they mean by temporary. When I was younger and I was going to school and dying because of it, I would wake up in the morning and I couldn't move at all, but it didn't last long. So when they say temporary, do they mean 2 weeks or do they mean more 20 minutes? Because I was much more in the camp of I would get paralysis, incredibly short-term paralysis. I couldn't move at all, and then my mum would help me manually move my joints, and that kind of, I guess, stimulated enough that I could do it myself. So I guess it depends what they mean by temporary, but I'm gonna assume that the temporary means longer than that. I think I have probably been at maybe 90%, but very short term. I would not say that this for me is what I would expect my kind of baseline to be. This is much more of a, okay, so you've done way too much, you're having a massive flare up and you feel like this for 2 days or for a month or whatever it is, but it's very much the result of a flare-up and not the illness baseline. So I probably wouldn't put myself there either, because I think that's not my normal level of functionality, and it hasn't been. Okay, so at 80%, we're now into the severe category, and we have confined to bed or chair for much or all of the time, incapable of living independently, may be able to stand for short periods of time, walk a few steps, may have episodes of temporary paralysis, not able to bathe, wash or dress without assistance, poor cognitive function, and hypersensitivity, nausea and pain. I think at my worst, this is where I was. I think I was always sitting or lying down. I've definitely had times where I just couldn't stand, barely be able to walk. In order to get to the bathroom, I'd have to have someone basically prop me up all the way there. But I could use the toilet on my own. I could brush my teeth on my own, but I would have help getting in and out of the bath. bath, I'd have help washing my hair, I'd have help getting dressed. Bearing in mind, I was going to school at this point, and which in retrospect was ridiculous. If you can't wash your own hair and you can't put your own clothes on because you feel too ill and it's too hard and it's too painful, you probably shouldn't be going to school and pretending. I think a lot of the worst stuff happened when I was 16, 17, 18, and I was so intensely hiding it, which probably was why it was getting worse and why I got to such a severe point that I haven't reached again, is because not only was I forcing myself to do things that I physically could not do, I was also forcing myself to pretend like it wasn't a problem. I was pretending like I wasn't struggling. I was pretending like everything was fine. I'd be woken up in the morning, unable to move. My mum would help me move my joints to get them going, I guess. She'd help me get dressed. She'd bring me my breakfast. She'd bring me my toothbrush. She'd look at my timetable and then put the right books in the bag. She'd do all of the things that you do on your own without thinking, or did. She'd do everything, including physically helping me get dressed and physically helping me down the stairs and physically putting me in the car. And I would then cry all the way to school because everything hurt and it was too hard and it was too painful and I desperately didn't want to do it. And then we would park at school. I'd wipe my tears in the mirror and I'd say, do I look okay? Can you tell? And my mum would say, no, you're fine. And then I would get out of the car and I would pretend I was fine. And then I would walk from the car to my classroom and I would talk to people at break. I say around this time I was doing about 2 hours at school. So it wasn't like I was there all day, but I would get there, talk to people at break, be in trouble for not going to registration. And then I'd, go to my lesson. I'd try and listen, which I couldn't. I'd try and make notes, which I couldn't. I couldn't hold the pen. I couldn't control my arm properly. I couldn't listen. I couldn't absorb what was happening. I had absolutely no brain at all. I wouldn't have done the homework and be hand your essays in. And I'd be like, I haven't done an essay. What essay? And then I would go home and I'd get back in the car and I would cry again and be like, what was even the point of that? I didn't learn anything. And then we would drive home and I would go to sleep, or I wouldn't go to sleep because at this point the doctor had told us that I wasn't allowed to nap. I wasn't allowed to sleep in the day, which meant that for the rest of the day, so I've done 2 hours at school, the rest of the day my mum's keeping me awake, which is a war crime. But keeping someone awake when they are dead tired is torture, literally torture. And it happened to me every day of my life for a year, 2 years, I don't know. And so amongst many things, that was one of the horrors. But all of this is to say I was never bedbound on the basis that I was being forced out of bed. If I had been under my own steam, I would not have gotten out of bed and I wouldn't have been able to on my own. I wouldn't have been able to do any of it on my own, and also shouldn't have been doing it. But this is what the doctors told us to do, so this is what we were doing. So I find that it's hard to measure, but I was in a dark place and I dreamed of being bedbound. And I think generally people see being bedbound as something to avoid. They don't want to do it. People don't, especially healthy people, maybe for a day or two it would be nice, but do you want to be bedbound for the next 6 months? They'd say no. They'd be bored. That would have been my dream come true if someone had turned around and gone, actually, the best thing for chronic fatigue is rest, lie down. I would have eaten my own arm for the opportunity for to not do that every day. I think that was severe, and I think that was severe whilst also forcibly getting out of bed. Technically, I wasn't confined to bed, but dear God, I should have been. And if I felt like that now, I would be over there lying down. You couldn't pry me out of that bed if I felt like that now. But at the time, I was a kid. I trusted the medical profession, and they said, you have to get out of bed and you have to go to school. And though it felt so deeply wrong, we did it. And so while I wasn't confined to the bed, everything else checks the yes. Maybe able to stand for a short period and walk a few steps. I did do that, and it was horrible, but it was possible. Incapable of living independently, I was doing nothing for myself. absolutely nothing. Maybe able to carry out a few physical activities related to personal care, but not normally able to bath, wash or dress without assistance. That's exactly where I was at. I could brush my teeth, I could go to the toilet if someone helped me to the bathroom, but I couldn't shower on my own, I couldn't get dressed on my own, I couldn't make cereal because you have to walk to the kitchen and then to the fridge and then to get the bowl and then to get this, and all of that. Just, it was too hard. And it was just cereal. And sometimes I would just stop eating in the middle of a meal and they'd say, my parents would be like, oh, are you full? And I'd be like, no, I'm too tired to do that. Being too tired to sit on a chair and too tired to move food with a fork from a bowl to your mouth is just a crazy level of tired. And again, we were told very much to keep the schedule and keep life how it is and do what you do. And so we ate dinner at the dining room table every day, like we always do. And it was hell. Another thing that was hell. The whole thing was awful. God. Sometimes I'm like, oh my God, just, you start thinking about it and you're like, what were we doing? But after that large tangent, this chair also starts sitting on a wooden hard chair. It's like, oh. Bit like a dining room chair, this is also horrible. So I think at my worst, consistently, I was probably at 80%. That's probably the worst I've been on a consistent basis, not as like a one-off week here and there. I think 80% is probably my max I've experienced long term. And I think if I experienced it again now, it wouldn't be as horrible. Not because it itself wouldn't be horrible, because I'm sure it would be, but I think if I wasn't forcing myself to get out of bed, if I wasn't forcing myself to go to school, if I wasn't forcing myself to pretend to be fine, I could do 80% a lot better now. So that's probably the worst I've been. Let's skip down a bit to looking for something where I am at now. Okay, at 70%, requires a bed or a chair, rest during the day, which I don't just kind of stand about. If able to leave the house, normally requires wheelchair assistance. I can do a tiny bit of a walk, but not really enough to get anywhere. So I pretty much always use my wheelchair when I go out. Maybe able to stand for a short period and walk a short distance. That could be me. May have episodes of temporary paralysis and speech may be affected. I haven't had like a temporary paralysis in a long time, so I have no idea why that is, why it went away, if and when it will come back. These things seem to cycle for me. Maybe able to carry out some physical activities related to personal care. See, I would say I carry out most personal care activities. Unable to prepare and cook a simple meal. Well, I can prepare and cook a simple meal, so maybe I'm lower down than 70. Cognitive function may be very poor. I think my cognitive function is definitely affected. I think my brain goes blank and foggy just at the drop of a hat very easily. I think I have blank spots in my memory, that things that just I should be able to remember that I just can't. I don't know if that's like a depression thing or an ME thing or a both thing, but I definitely have cognitive issues. I think this says cognitive function would be very poor, and I probably wouldn't describe my cognitive function as very poor, maybe like reduced, but not like a severe problem for me. And I think I'm a bit more able than the 70%, though an amount of it like checked the boxes. I feel like not enough. I think I do need to go lower. At 60%, we're in severe to moderate now, which is this category is the one I kind of estimated I would be in. Significant restrictions on all aspects of everyday life. I think that rings true. Everything is adjusted. Everything takes long. Everything has rests. Everything's definitely affected. Not usually confined to the house, but has significant reductions in mobility, difficulty with remaining upright due to balance or dysautonomia, may therefore require wheelchair assistance or walking aids. So that is true. I wouldn't say I'm like confined to the house, but I also don't find it easy to go out. Going out requires other people. It requires planning. It requires knowing where you're going and what you're going to do. So I would agree to that. That does ring true. That seems like kind of where I am. I use a wheelchair. I have a walking stick. I have a rollator, like all of these things to make going out easier, and they do, but going out is still hard. Likely to require some help with aspects of personal care and meal preparation, cooking. My mum fills my med boxes. She does my washing. She cleans. I generally cook for myself. Meal preparation, I buy things pre-chopped, or I have things in the freezer that I've already cooked. So I like reduce the amount of preparation. It's all kind of like, I guess, finding the way around things, but I generally do it on my own. Normally able to wash, bathe and dress without assistance. I can do all of those things, but I do avoid them when I feel unwell. So I think a lot of the things like on the PIP form, it's like, do you need assistance on a bad day to get dressed? And it's one of those things of like, well, like I don't need assistance because I just won't do it. If I feel bad, I don't get dressed. I don't get out of bed. I don't do things. So I don't need the help. I just don't do them. Do you require help to shower on a bad day? Well, no, because I don't shower on a bad day. So I think I kind of avoid these things that when I can't do them, I just don't. But yeah, I thinking 60% severe to moderate is looking like pretty accurate to me. Let's see what 50% is. Still significant restrictions on all aspects of daily living. Not usually confined to house, but has reduction in mobility, moderate symptoms at rest, and significant symptom exacerbation following any form of mental or physical exertion. Maybe I'll do some light or flexible work or study from home. See, maybe it's 50 because if you count this as work, this is very light, very flexible work that I do. It's the second time in a row actually that I've been sat on this horrible chair, and halfway through I've just been like, ow. So yeah, so I think that means for me, I'm probably sitting between 60 and 50%, maybe. It's one of those things, it's quite hard to tell, and because it's all so changeable, but that's where I'm kind of going to guess that I'm at right now. In the last, let's say, month, this is me. I think it's kind of interesting because like anything, the way your symptoms express themselves is kind of unique. Presumably the way they want you to use the list is just to say that I agree with the majority in this one, and slightly less in this one, or slightly less in this one, so it is this one. Because I think there are lots of things in different categories that I think, yeah, that's me. But I think what we're doing here is picking the one we agree with the most. Again, with the appearing, disappearing, reappearing nonsense symptoms. It's hard to put yourself in a category when you're, I guess it's like trying to define like a small piece of river by like what's in the water, but you know, the water's changing every time you come to measure it. The actual water, the beings in the water, maybe they're all different. I don't know enough about rivers to make this make sense. I don't know, not the best analogy, but maybe you know what I mean. But trying to like categorize yourself and then being like, yes, this is me, I am 50%, I am 60, you know, whatever it is, and then holding on to like strongly to the category you've like decided is you. I understand the benefit, and I think it's very interesting to see the kind of variation, but I also think it's probably wise not to hold too tightly onto these types of things because of the changeable nature. Some people ask me, like in comments and stuff, like, what severity are you? Obviously before this I didn't really know. I think I've now decided on, did I decide on 50 or 60? I think I decided on 50. But if I'm completely honest, I'm not sure that will be helpful to anyone else to know that I am 50. Because even if you are also 50, it doesn't mean that we can do the same things, because this is a subjective measure, right? I don't want to like imply that if I am 50 and I can do this and you are 50 and you can't do this, that means there's something wrong with you. I don't want it to be like, you know, you're wrong in terms of how much you're doing. Oh, well, I'm doing this much and I'm 50, so you should be doing that much too. And if you're not trying. It's hard not to compare, and it's hard not to see someone with the same diagnosis and be like, well, if they can do that, why can't I do that? Or the opposite, if you see someone with the same diagnosis who's way worse and you think, am I a fraud? How can I be, you know, sitting up and dressed and gotten ready and speaking? How dare I say I have the same illness when someone's clearly suffering much more than me? And I think actually neither of those things are helpful, and I think it's why I've said it a lot, remembering that the variability is massive, and all of the people on this kind of spectrum we're all here together even though we're at different points. Nobody is more or less valid even if they're more or less severe. Yeah, I think a lot of stuff comes down to like, make sure you're looking at the information for the right reason. You know, I'm sure there are lots of, you know, good, positive, helpful ways you can look at this and use it well. But I think there's definitely also the possibility that you look at it and 6 months ago you were a lower percentage and now you're upset. Sometimes the signpost that tells you you're worse than you used to be is really harmful. It really hits you deeply emotionally. And if you're the type of person to really feel that kind of loss, and even worse, if you blame yourself for the loss of ability, maybe steer clear of things that are going to give you like if this is gonna send you on a dark spiral because maybe you're not as good as you thought you were. I have experience of seeing the writing on the wall and it says, you're way worse than you were last year. Your life is getting worse. Just a little bit of friendly advice to think about whether it's gonna be helpful for you if you go and like try and work out your own score, or harmful. I hope you enjoyed this one. Thank you so much for watching. I will see you in the next one. Bye!